Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshops, when we get together in the middle of the week and we talk tech. This is the third Wednesday of the month, and that is traditionally our Learning Linux workshop. And again, today we will be presenting some information from the Linux team, which is Orv Beach and Calvin Esneault and Dave Melton and myself. And we got a number of interesting topics to share today. Plus, we're going to have a nice big roundtable for everybody to take part in. We're going to do some polls to find out where things are with everybody. And that'll give us some ideas about what's coming up or what might come up in the future. Today, we're going to start out with a in-depth look at one of the best places that we've all mentioned before about looking for information about Linux, but there's a lot more to DistroWatch than what we've mentioned before. So I'm going to turn things over to Cal, and he's going to share with you what all you can do with DistroWatch. Cal.
Okay, if I share my screen. Okay, is that coming through?
Yes, it is.
All right, so DistroWatch is a Linux guide. So the first thing, when you get into Linux, you realize that Linux is another word for choice.
Cal, can you turn that into a presentation, please?
You can't see it?
Yeah, we can, but we're seeing the ribbon and the side animation part and everything. Click on slideshow.
Oh, it didn't go. Let's see. Let me stop share a second. Well, I'm going to get there in a second. There's green.
That was interesting. It was grayed out.
Yeah, hold on. I've had this problem before one time. Ah. There's green. Now I'm going to start the slideshow. So can you see it now?
Nope, we just still see the.
How about if you
creation.
click on the X and close the animation pane on the right-hand side? Haven't got a clue if that will make any difference, but.
Are you on multiple screens?
No.
Okay.
Let me move it. Let me put it on another screen. Hold on.
Kurt. unmute yourself if you have a solution.
You can't,
And I
but
bet you do.
gave him permission.
Okay, he needs to start the presentation before he starts screen sharing. Otherwise, he can't pick the presentation screen.
Okay.
Or the easiest thing to do is I always tell people just share your whole desktop.
I'll start the presentation.
Now, when you go to start screen sharing, you'll see two windows. The one you want to share is the presentation, and then you can watch the presenter's view.
Okay, well, I keep losing share screen. Yeah, as soon as I started, I lose the controls.
In Windows, I would tell you to use Alt-Tab to go back to the Zoom window. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that's what. Hold on, I've got to move it though. I've got to move it into another window. I'll move it into another window. I'll start it. Okay, I have it now.
Yep.
Perfect. Whoa.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the first thing you find out with Linux is Linux means choice. Too much choice to some people. So the positive effect is that you can make it fit your exact personal style and needs. The negative of that is sometimes it takes time to learn, and it tends to fragment the market. So you have all these different distributions. So everyone in Linux has to make two decisions. What distribution are you going to use, and what desktop are you going to have on that distribution? So I found that Linux users go through a sort of a path where first you're a newbie. And that doesn't mean you don't know anything about computers. It simply means you haven't used Linux. You might have used Windows for 20 years. Then after you get used to it, most people are not satisfied, and they hear about one distribution or another one, and they go check it out, and they try one, another, and what's called a distro hopping stage. And after a while, you finally figure out what fits you, and then you're on the daily driver stage, the one you use every day, and you have a strategy. Now, as time goes on, you may want to slightly modify that strategy and get another distribution, but generally you are kind of keeping certain basic concepts the same. So today I'm going to talk about DistroWatch as a resource for when you start and in the middle and when you're very experienced. I think DistroWatch will help it in all stages. So what is DistroWatch? It is a website that keeps up with open source operating systems. And it's been going on since 2001, tracking all kinds of technical details about Linux systems. It has kind of a daily announcement or a notice page and a weekly summary of what's going on. It also has a separate web page for each distribution that it's following. It turns out that currently there are 271 active Linux distributions in their database. And that's not all, because there's over 600 that they've discontinued. So there's over 900 that they've tracked over the years. What they do is one of the things they do is they publish the page traffic that goes to each one of these separate distributions. And that is called hits per day. That is a visit to a page on their website. And the whole site is really a big database, and they have a bunch of script that kind of feeds in and fills in most of the pages. So the database is searchable by certain tracked criteria that they have. It also has a lot of general background and information for all users. Now, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and this is the ranking, the distro ranking, or hits per day. Now, this specifically refers to the web traffic on their website, and they separate it out by how many hits they get on each one of the individual pages that track a different distribution. And this they kind of call popularity, and this has caused a lot of controversy with people who review Linux distributions. People who review Linux distributions tend to tell you what's the best distribution or the best 5 or the best 10. And they get a lot of controversy when they say DistroWatch has this ranking. And one of the things they say is it does not track the downloads. It just tracks people going to that page. And I agree with that. And they say they do not track the people that actually install it or the number of people that use it, which I absolutely agree with. And they also say it can be manipulated. You can have some kind of bot or something go artificially keep going to that page to fake the score. And that is true. However, despite all of that, it's a well-known, it really is broad-based. It just takes data, so it's basically objective, and it's publicly viewable. I'm sure other distributions have data on their own particular distribution, but they don't share that generally. So what I say is use this ranking as a guide. And then once you use it as a guide, then you have to do due diligence and read as many reviews as you can and try it as a live USB to see what you really think of it. In my opinion, the hits per day does have trend value, and it shows the interest or current activity that people they're looking at this particular distribution. Now that precise rankings will go up and down with time. So I think if you look at, they have it for the month and 3 months. I think if you go 6 to 12 months out, you'll kind of dampen the scatter or the noise, the statistical noise, and give you a little bit better view, but it's not a very precise ranking. So my personal observation is that the first quartile, the first 25% of these 270 distributions, I look at them and I'm familiar with most of them. When I look at the second quartile, they're like ranked 70 to 140. I know some of them. And then when we get to the bottom half, most of them are obscure to me personally. So I kind of put, you can tell what's at the top end in general. You just can't get too precise in separating. So here's the DistroWatch front page. If you went to distrowatch.com, you'd see this, and it goes on to the bottom. So in the middle are all the daily news releases that come out and their summaries, and it just goes on and on. Every day they keep adding and adding. On the right-hand side is the infamous ranking. You know, 1, 2, 3. So number 1 has more hits. You can see it has about 3,000 hits per day and then 2,800. So it's also a good place. If you click on that link, it'll take you to the page about that distribution. So it's a good way to kind of navigate to those pages. There's also other search tools. You can search by name, and then there's a search function for the database, which I'll show in a minute. On the left-hand side, they keep up daily with kind of news, what distributions were released, packages, and this kind of time chronologically recent information. And then there's a site map and some other general information that's up at the top menu. So if I go to a particular page, if I clicked on Manjaro Linux, for instance, I would get a page. And if I go to any other distribution, I'll get a page that follows this same format. At the top, there's a lot of common data that they track, and you can see the type of operating system, what is it based on? This one is based on Arch. Where does it come from? And on and on. And there's kind of like a little paragraph describing that distribution. There's also a bunch of links below how to get to the site. There's links about reviews. And if you keep on going down the same page, it will actually give you links to the most recent releases. Now, I generally go to the actual website myself, but this will bring you to some mirror or something where you can actually download the ISO for that particular release. I like to look at it to see what the date, how often do they release, and they'll tell you if there's release candidates and final versions and give you that information. And then also, if any news that they have picked up about that particular distribution, they'll kind of put it here. And again, it's chronological. So the last news about this distribution was back in February. If you keep on going down, and this is just kind of a few of the columns, it will tell you the features. So each distribution page will have this information, and it'll have, here's the latest releases. So they had 19, and the latest one is 21.2. And if there's one, you can get what's called an overnight image. And it'll tell you things like how big it is, what's the default desktop, what kind of package manager it uses, and so forth. And you can get a list of all the packages here. You can also, if you go further down, it would tell you that they have a list of packages they track, and it'll tell you if that distribution uses it and what version of that package goes with what version of that distribution. This is kind of too detailed for me unless you really got a specific need. On the left-hand side of the first page, again, this is various, here you see the latest releases, all these distributions, tails released in Robo Linux, and so almost every day there's 2 or 3 being released. Here's the information. You get newsletters. Some of the distributions put out newsletters, and there are many podcasts that have to do with Linux. I kind of like a late night Linux and destination Linux, but at least it's a reasonable list, and it keeps you updated so you can see when a new one has appeared. And there's also in various other places, general background information. There's a glossary if you want to know the definition of some Linux terms. And they have some typical Q&A answers. So that's kind of the outline of their site. Now, if your purpose is to find a particular distribution or learn about a particular distribution, and you go to the front page and you know the name, you can just put the name in here and drop this down and find the name, and it'll take you to that page. But so what you have to do is you have to, you look at that one, then you go back and you look at another one, you look at another one. Another thing you can do though is search by certain criteria. So if you went to that spot, you would see here's the tool for you to search. And you drop down and it'll give you a bunch of choices. And you'll see the operating type, category, country of origin, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what items are in here. So in the operating type, it has Linux, but it also has BSD and Solaris, which is still kind of alive in part. Then it's categorized certain things like beginners and security, NAS server. So I don't know how they decide, but they have decided, and a distribution could be more than one of these categories. Then the country of origin, and there's a ton of countries here. Then the desktop environment. I bet you didn't know there was this many desktops. So this is over 50 desktops on this list. And you can see some of the common ones, GNOME, and KDE Plasma, Mate, but there's lots of some I've never heard of and have never used. Then the architecture. So this is amazing because these are all the types of computers that Linux will run on. Normally we think of it as an x86 or an x86 64, but it'll also run on Raspberry Pis or other system on a chip. The 64-bit will run the AArch 64. The 32-bit has to run an ARM HF, hard float. And then there's some others. The old Sun computers are still out there. They're still listed. And it goes on, different package managers. Of course, we use the RPM and Debian, but it also has containers, Flatpak and Snap, and there's a few other items. The one thing I should caution you is that these items are listed in any of the 900 distributions that it has ever covered at any time. So some of these may no longer be relevant or available. And it just, to me, makes it kind of confusing. But if I did a search, and here I did a search for beginners and KDE Plasma and GNOME, and what it'll do, it'll give you a listing of the name and the description, and it ranks it by their hits per day. So that would be one way. If you wanted to see beginners, you can get a list of all what they list as beginners. Now, to me, this can kind of be confusing if you're just going to go in and try to use that search term. And I had a project, I wanted to find out distros suitable for typical desktop users. Not an IT person or so forth. So I had to simplify some of this database. And what I did was I made a spreadsheet That's how I analyze things. And I only took a few of the categories: distro name, what it's based on, origin desktops category, popularity. And I took that first quartile, the first 70 most popular, quote unquote, and I took out about 16 that didn't fit. Then I looked down the list a little further and I said, well, here's 4 others I think I ought to include. They gave me 58 out of the 900 that have ever been. And I kind of had to change a couple things to make it fit. You always have to kind of massage any input data you're going to analyze. So here's what my spreadsheet looked like. So it has the distribution and what it's based on and so forth, the desktops. I took the categories and I kind of just ticked them so that I can sort by them. And I took that whole paragraph and I kind of dropped it down to something, 2 or 3 words that I could understand. For instance, Endeavor, I call it Easy Arch, and Fedora is a community version of the Red Hat commercial software. So that's kind of just so that I had a clue as to what I was looking at. So you can go and analyze it various ways, and I looked at where are they from. And Europe came out as having the most distributions. Mainly they come from France and Germany. Germany is real big. And the middle and the foreign Eastern Europe, far under the Soviet regime, all of those countries tend to have got onto Linux early. And then you can see the rest of the world is a lot less. And the reason for that, I think, is because they don't speak English. And this is an English site. So you're seeing the English versions only. They probably have as many or more as the English-speaking versions. They just don't report it in DistroWatch. Or DistroWatch doesn't read their language. Interesting, I like those from USA and the Great Britain. And you notice in Great Britain region, Isle of Man and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland come up. They have great tax incentives in those countries versus the UK. So this is nice to know. And you should look at that because lots of times if you go to a foreign country and it's got an English version, it just might be a duplicate of one that originally came from the US, and they just have a version and then they translate it, another version, into their own language. So here's what I did to make sense of all of this. I separated it out by package manager. So Debian, a dpackage, Pacman, RPM, and then things that weren't as defined. And I kind of gave them another name, and I'll explain this. So Debian is a package manager. It's also a group of people that do a lot of work, and it's also a distribution. So this here tends to be more organizational, and this is the technique, the package manager. What Debian people did is they wrote a lot of software, over 50,000 apps, programs, and they maintain them. So, and you can go, because it's open source, you can just point to where their software is. So a lot of these distributions, they just save themselves a lot of work. They don't have to do the maintenance, they don't have to do the compiling, and they can just add on what they want. This Debian came from the early days, in the early 1990s. In the early 2000s, a company named Canonical came on and wanted to make it for the average typical user. And they started with Ubuntu, and they have, and you see the slightly darker color, this is what they call their flavors, other desktops. But Ubuntu added a whole bunch of stuff to Debian. So Ubuntu is about 75% Debian and 25% Ubuntu. And a lot of people say, well, that's great. And they put it out in open source. So a lot of other people say, well, since you did all this work and Ubuntu did all this work, we'll just build it on top of it. And we just add our little bit on top. And so that's how you get so many Linux distributions. They're based on these main root distributions, and they just modify. When Ubuntu went to make it easier for people, there was another change in the early 2000s, Arch. And Arch was developed, they said Debian had too many rules. They wanted more power. So they came up with an Arch distribution that allows you to do a lot more. And here are a bunch of Arch distributions. And with Arch is kind of takes a lot of skill, and people have been trying to make the installation and use a lot easier. Also, back when Debian came out in the early 1990s, there was a company called Red Hat that started. It said, well, we think we can make money out of Linux by having a service to enterprise businesses. And they came out with Red Hat, eventually Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is for big companies, and it gets support from Red Hat. So Fedora was in the development. Fedora is something where community, that is volunteers, can go and help start experimenting with things which are going to get into Red Hat. In between, they've recently changed and put CentOS in there. They bought CentOS. There are other people that just take RHEL and just copy it and rebrand it. If you don't want to pay the money for the support, some of these, but you have a big organization or need that type of distribution, this is one way to get it. Then there are others which kind of go their own way, and I'll show you some of their differences. So this is the way I kind of divided up those 58 distributions. Now, one thing you got to know is that the Red Hat and Debian Ubuntu are all fixed release. That means every 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, they go in and they rework the whole distribution, make everything work. Whereas the Arch people, they want the latest. One of the reasons for starting Arch was they didn't want to wait 2 years to get an update. They want to update the day after it's done. So they have a rolling release where every day, if something changes, you immediately get it. So the difference is that in a rolling release, sometimes things can go wrong a lot more often than a fixed release. So typically, if you're doing a rolling release, you need to have a little experience of how to fix things that go wrong. Now, if I looked at all the distributions I looked at, and I said, how many desktops are in there? I find there's like a little over 30 desktops. And I want to note that any Linux desktop can be usually put on any Linux distro if you know what you're doing, if it's got the right CPU architecture. And this is what DistroWatch put. It puts the recommended desktops, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's where I got the data. So I said, how do I differentiate? So I said, well, let me just count the number of distros that use a particular desktop. And it turns out that the winners are KDE, GNOME, and XFCE. And I kind of split it between Debian, Ubuntu, and Red Hat, Bar, and Arch, and any others. And there's not much, they're both ranked the same way. So what you got, these are the classic desktops that a lot of people use. Mate and Cinnamon have come along. They have beginners. They're a little bit easier, give you a little more help. They're a little more constricted. And then these are for lighter weight type applications. So these, I think these top 5 here kind of tell the tale for most people. And I said, okay, a lot of these distributions have server versions. And again, almost any Linux desktop, if you know what you're doing and you're persistent, you can make it a server. But these distributions have optimized it and have special tools sometimes. And so you see Arch and Debian and Ubuntu. Ubuntu is both for the desktop and a server. And so these are what I call the root distributions. They were at the top and people kind of build off of them. Debian is simply Debian without systemd. If you don't know what it's just an initialization system. And there's some others. SUSE is another country in Germany. It's like Red Hat. And so they have a development branch called OpenSUSE. And then they have SUSE Linux Enterprise, which is their RHEL, R-H-E-L, commercial offer. And you have Slackware, which is the original, in the original group. You have those that isolate the core for security. And Gentoo. Gentoo is a distribution where you have to compile everything. So it's only for the pros, in my mind. And you go on down, and then all the Red Hats can be server, because they're all trying to get to look kind of like RHEL, which is a commercial and very well certified for all kinds of government regulations. Now, so a lot of people are looking at DistroWatch, or these IT professionals, or people with big network, and they're mixed in now with the average desktop user. So they all fit in this ranking. Now I looked and said, okay, on the other end, how about if you have an old computer, or very low power computer, not much memory, and there's a whole bunch of Linux distributions that look at that. And most of them are kind of built on Debian. But Debian is a favorite versus Debian and Ubuntu. And if you go to those which fall in the special category, well, you've got one that's Chinese, and you've got some security focused distros. You've got one that looks at this app image package manager, a container. If you don't want to have anything but free software, no commercial, no blobs, as they say, everything open 100% is pure OS. There's things for different devices like your Raspberry Pi, there's audio, video, and so forth. So now let's get back. So I kind of said those that maybe not fit the average desktop user. What about the beginners list? Well, the beginners list is well-known names to most of us. And they kind of use the Ubuntu tools. So whether they're part of Ubuntu organization or not, they use a lot of Ubuntu's work. And then on the special side, you have PC Linux, which is semi-rolling, and you have Solus, which came from, I guess, Aki Doherty. This guy did it. He's got his whole idea of how to remake the package manager, and it has his own desktop. So then I say, okay, what if I go out in the world, if you go out on the web and say, give me the best 10 Linux distros or the best 5, you'll get a whole bunch of hits. So I put some of them down from, here's some well-known sites that they're like digital magazines. And so you'll see a lot of them I talked about are here, but there's a couple. Ubuntu, that's the KDE version of Ubuntu. Pop OS, which is made by the System 76, which is a Linux, makes Linux computers. There's MX Linux, which is something that has gained a lot of notoriety later. There's Chrome OS, and Chrome OS is not in the database because it's not quote unquote open source, according to DistroWatch. So if I take these and all the rest, and I superimpose these over my separation by package manager, what you can see is that the root, these are like the root distributions, are all server distributions. Your Red Hat or server, a lot of these servers, that's what are special. This one is only the same as Debian, except it uses a different startup code. In the purple, these are lightweight. A lot of people take things off of Debian to make it lightweight, or they use a slightly different base and make it lightweight. But what we're left with now, for kind of those that made the beginners and the popular list, of MX Linux and Solus and PC Linux. Those are all good choices. And then you have all the Debian and Ubuntu. And so you've been seeing, as we've talked through most of our discussions, most of us have been using Debian or Debian Ubuntu distributions. And you can see it going down here. So, and then there's some of them, these are also good distributions. I'm not gonna be negative on it, but if we look at these distributions, what we find, the beginners and the best, you notice that generally they have limit their desktops. And they only have one desktop, and that kind of, you can install other desktops on these distributions, but that kind of defeats the purpose if you're trying to make it for beginners or make it easy to use, right? And that's what makes them popular, makes it easy to use. So limiting the number of desktops or having a special version, so like in Linux Mint, you can actually download this version already pre-made. You don't have to do anything extra. Now, if you go to some of the others, the KDE Neon, the Farron, those which are good distributions that didn't fall in the quote unquote beginners, you notice they too tend to have focus on one desktop. But when you come to Arch, you've got tons of desktops. And so Arch tends to offer all these desktops, but they're also rolling package release. They're very flexible, but they're also very susceptible to having issues. So if you know how to solve the issues, that's great. Then you get to use tiling desktops and special desktops or old desktops. But be aware that the Arch distributions generally require more experience. So the question everybody asks is, what distribution is the best? Which one should I use? And so if you go through DistroWatch, you'll see there's lots of questions you need to answer. And it takes experience to kind of be able to answer these questions, and then they'll change with time. So again, when people start out, just pick a distribution and learn Linux in general, then try a few out, and then you can go and get very specific about these questions and figure out what works exactly for you. And I think DistroWatch, if it does one thing, instead of telling you something to pick, to me, it will tell you what not to pick, and you'll have a smaller group to investigate. Another thing that it does, it alerts you as things come up. When something is happening, you immediately see it to see if you need to keep up with the times. So that's my topic, and I think we can take questions.
I think Judy said she had one to ask you. Then we'll save others for later.
Another totally clear presentation that I totally understand, which is way cool. Timothy would like to know how to specify the VMware release you are running, as well as the Mac OS and hardware you want to run the distro upon.
The VMware, I don't know. If they don't address VMware or Mac, they're just going out looking at the distributions. You have to go to VMware to see if there's a problem with those. VMware usually take it. But that's a VMware or VirtualBox or whatever virtual machine engine hypervisor you're using. That is not something that DistroWatch tracks.
But through DistroWatch, you would probably have an idea of how much RAM that you might need for your virtual machine, or how big a hard drive to put it on.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever had to worry about VirtualBox other than size of RAM and size of hard drive to test out anything.
Well, generally speaking, if you look and see that it runs x86, that's the main requirement. It has to run the Intel x86 code, and that's in one of those drop downs. So that would, you wouldn't want to try to run it with Sun or something like that.
He said he's looking at the VMware site to see if he can figure out which Ubuntu server he needs to download to see if it will work on his older Macs.
I don't know about Mac. I don't know about Macs at all.
Right.
Yeah, he probably would need to be looking for an Intel version of a Mac machine to do that.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy, over to you.
One of the things that was terrific, Cal, lots of great information. And I liked all the work that you did, because now when we get the slideshow for those people who their names match their email from registering, I'll be able to get that list and review it, because you did a lot of footwork, things that I've looked at too when I've gone through DistroWatch. I do want to say that in the stuff that he was talking about in DistroWatch, they do have like a weekly newsletter or Slight magazine that you can go to and read each week about all the big things that have changed on that. Well, we might come back and talk about that during our Roundtable Open Top. The second part of today, a lot of people have asked over time about where else do you go to get good information about Linux. And so I thought today we would let the team start first and share some of the places and some of the things they go to get information on Linux. And then during the, well, you can put it in the chat box if you have a place that you like to go, like we were going to talk about that we haven't mentioned. Put it in the chat box so that Judy can add that to our list to send out. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Orv and let Orv share some of the websites or places that he likes to go and recommend about learning about Linux.
Oh, thanks, John. This is sort of in the category of winging it. because when you're searching Google, you never know what you're going to find. Let me share my screen. I think it'll be this one. Let me go there. I had pulled up a list of, I think John sent this list. Oh, sorry, wrong calendar item. Where are we here? Oh yeah. I had sent this list of various YouTube videos, but just an example of how you search for, typically searching in Google, you preface it, in our case, either with Linux or you want to be specific. You can say Ubuntu, how to set up a printer. And they summarize it from this, that Google is nice about that. But I also ran across help.ubuntu.com, which I'd never seen before, assuming we ever get there. Help, help, help. Let me try it this way. See if help.ubuntu, there we go. Yeah, and they've got the older versions here, a couple of the LTS, 22.04 is an LTS. You could download them all as a, oops, that's a server. Okay, if you're running Ubuntu server, these are the documents you want. Cal touched briefly on the differences. And if you want the HTML help files, they're right here. They're not available in PDF. Well, let's see. Apparently 200 megabits per second internet isn't enough. You know, while we do this, John, if people have maybe specific questions, I could try Googling them and see what we come up with. That would be a good test. So let's see. How to set up networking in Kubuntu. Here's ask Kubuntu, you know, and you can do a search in here. Almost all of the major distributions have a website, and in the website is typically, at a minimum, a wiki, FAQ, stuff like that. Some of the stuff is deep dive. Some of it is GUI configuration. Okay, here we go. Finally, let's see. PRINTER. I'm on the Ubuntu help site again. Let's see what they say. Set up a local printer. If your printer's plugged in via USB or, God help you, serial or parallel, I don't even know if they talk about that anymore, but here's how to set up a local printer. If it's a network printer, it's over here. These days, setting up peripherals is pretty easy if you have a printer in the top 10 most popular. Speaking of printers, is it linuxprinting.org? Yeah, that redirect, that's the old URL. It redirects you to openprinting.github. Documentation. Well, this is designing here, but Linux, try this. Linux printer, can't type either. Oh, here we go. It's open printing, not Linux printing. So basically, I think I did this a couple years ago. If I want to know about if there are any, say, HP printers that are compatible, well, here, I'll select them down here. Show all. The nice thing about open printing is they rate them by the number of penguins. Green perfectly, all of these here. And by the way, HP is very friendly to Linux. They help maintain the drivers. they're not really drivers, they're config files. Here's some older ones. And if you have a couple of these older laser jets, they're quite heavy and they'd be very effective at propping a door open. Do we have any questions, John?
Not at this moment. We can always do that during the roundtable and stuff.
Okay. And well, and it's again the typical search in YouTube. Now let's see, how to install a printer in Linux Mint. Well, we have a number of them. And this little bit of advice will go for any instructions you look up on YouTube. Pay attention to the date. You know, they come up with typical Linux updates, most of them, most distros, at least annually, if not every 6 months. So here's add a printer in Linux Mint 4 years ago. Take a pass on it. Here's a couple more current one, you know, a year ago. That'll probably align more accurately with the current version, assuming you're running a current version of Linux. And if you're not, why not? They're pretty easy to upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular YouTube person that you trust to give you the straight scoop on something you want to do with Linux?
Not generally. Well, I'm the wrong person to ask because I don't look up a lot of stuff. But typically I'll find the couple most recent videos. I'll start with the short ones on a specific topic and then go to the longer ones. It's like any other topic. It's quite often that someone will, in a presentation, will mention something that a person in a previous YouTube video did not, you know, fill in the blanks type stuff. So it's helpful to, you know, look over a couple of them. And that's true for anything over and above Linux. There's the quality of videos obviously is all over the map. Most of the guys who do the Linux YouTubes are good at Linux, obviously, but their presentation skills are a bit varied. Again, true of anything on YouTube. John, I'm open to suggestions for look for other stuff.
I have one.
Go ahead.
How to clone a bootable 2-partition flash drive.
In Linux or Windows?
Well, we're in a Linux workshop, so I have to assume that George wants it for Linux. But you know, those Canadians, we all aren't always sure.
There you go.
Ah.
And because you're taking an image, it doesn't care what's on the original drive, how many partitions or what. Actually, I would use DD. It's a command line thing, you know, copy this one to this one. But, you know, there's obviously GUI tools. Here, tell you what. There you go. There's your command. Oh, by the way, you asked me about it. This site here, when I Google something, he is frequently at in the top 2 or 3 mentions. Short, easily copied instructions, mostly command line stuff. But again, they're short and like cookbook. This is one I'd recommend. By the way, if you're on Facebook, he has a page on Facebook too, cybercity.biz.
And Judy will add that to the list that some of us have.
Oh,
so that everybody will get.
Writing that down.
Well, I was going to make him send it to you.
Fortunately, it's short. This guy's very sharp. He's in the industry. Pretty good communication skills. I find most of his stuff fairly easy to read, fairly not overly detailed. Again, I'm reminiscing. You know, every Linux command has the vast majority of Linux commands have a help file, a man page, and man stands for manual. They're very detailed. They cover everything. In fact, sometimes they're so detailed they're unreadable. There used to be a set of man pages called newbieized help files. I don't know if they're still around or not, but they take out the obscure stuff and leave in the common stuff and much more readable. Newbieized help files, NHFs they were called. I haven't looked at them in years. I don't know if they're still around or not, but they were very helpful when I was getting started.
So that would be a Judy website.
Well, anybody getting started.
But super simple. How dependent are distributions on the underlying file systems?
Well, when you install a new distro, it uses the whole disk typically, or a VM, whatever. It uses whatever, all of whatever it's given, be it a partition or the whole drive, and it creates the underlying file system. There are a bunch of different flavors of file systems, surprise, but the vast majority of distros use one or maybe two file systems. ext4 is very, very popular. BTRFS is used by a few. Some of the more technical ones might use XFS, and maybe some of the specialized distros might have underlying distros that are different, because like for XFS, it's designed to handle bazillions of small files, whereas ext4 is more generalized. I hope that answered the question. You don't have to worry about the underlying file system because the installation takes care of it for you.
What, just for me, last question. What's that thing with the dials?
Oh, well, you asked.
It's colorful, therefore it appeals to me.
Okay, you asked. Okay, I'm a ham radio operator, duh. And I do digital stuff, duh. Well, there's an email program developed specifically for ham radio known as WinLink Express. And over the years, it's expanded its capability. It can go over high frequencies, VHF, our ham radio network. It can go over the internet. And its main function backup is if, for instance, we have an extended internet outage during an emergency in the area. It's designed to be able to forward emails out to a ham radio station that does have internet, and it will forward them on to the destination. This is the client. Let me minimize it. This is this are the HF monitor. You can see it over here. It's scanning 3 different bands, waiting for calls, incoming calls. There's 20 meters, 15 meters during the day. And you can see the last station that contacted me was N70P. He happens to be up in Lancaster. He does, short haul stuff on 40 meters. This one here does 2 different types of VHF protocols, the older 1200 baud packet and the newer up to 25 kilobits per second via FM. And I am not, let me see. I am not running a post office. Let me open this session. Okay, and this one's runs over a ham radio network, and you can see it'll start up. It's going to go in, and assuming this post office is up, let me see. Let me check one thing. I've been working on my ham network this morning, and you know what they say. If you work on something enough, you'll break it. So I need to fix that after this. So anyway, you asked. Oh, I guess I closed my Firefox. Well, anyway, I'm going to stop sharing. And that's pretty much it, John, unless there are some more questions.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
But Orv is going to be giving us a presentation on ham radio, which is going to be way cool when he puts it all together, because he is one. And several of our people are. When I go to the sign in that John sends me, they will have their letters and numbers behind their names, their call signs. See, I remembered. Orv.
Thank you.
Over to John.
All right. I wanted to check in with Dave Melton, who's a part of the team and one of maybe a newer person into Linux, to see if he has.
I'll share my screen and I'll show you what I'm looking at here. And I don't know that I need to share sound, but I will just in case. So I have here my, why am I not seeing it anymore? I got some kind of ad instead. Let's try this. Okay, oh, I see. Sorry about that, you guys. So what I did when I first got started a couple years ago and playing around with Linux is I did a lot of YouTube searching, which sent me to other locations. And what I did is I watched people's videos and their presentations, as Orv was saying, and you've got to take it with a grain of salt. But one video would lead me to another video and get different questions answered. And one of the guys I really enjoyed a lot, and he has a whole series of courses on Linux, is this person right here.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Linode. In today's
So he's talking about Linode right now, but which is his sponsor, and he'll do stuff like 18 commands, for example. And he has videos about installing Linux, and it's very in-depth. So I've enjoyed a lot of his videos, and I would definitely recommend him. Another guy is this guy right here, but you've got to be moving right along if you want to listen to this guy. He's like on Coffee Max here, but he has a lot of good information to share. I could pull him up and let me see.
Tap into the incredible world of stop motion animation and learn techniques from the ground up to create fun.
I did it. I finally did it. I took the Linux Plus exam. I know I promised you a year ago I would take this, and then a few times after that, but I got it done of it.
Anyway, you kind of get the idea. He just moves right along. Another person I enjoyed is another website, and I don't see it right at the moment, and I don't have it pinned. There's a guy in England, and I'll find it and send it to Judy so that she can put it in the notes. But he goes very in depth about hardware, software, a beginner, a more advanced user. He's done videos about explaining how a hard drive is how it stores its data, and being a technical person, I really enjoy that sort of stuff. But this also led me to install some distributions, and I think I gave a presentation here on distro hopping, and that really kind of began for me when I joined this group a year or two ago, whatever it's been. And what that led me to is I would install what I would have considered a newbie Linux distro, and then I would want more. So I would wipe that out and try again. And then I started doing virtual machines. And then I could have several distributions installed and test the differences between them. And that's really about all I have at this point, John. I don't know if we have any questions. I'll be happy to see if I can answer them.
Yeah, well, we've got a whole roundtable coming up. That's great, because you even included one that I had, and I had thought that you might include something like that, being
cool.
a newer guy.
Thinking
Great.
along the same lines.
Yeah, yeah. Cal, now you had a little bit of time to rest. Any of your favorite suggestions or things to include?
Yeah, so see if I have any luck in sharing my screen here.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just leave it right here. So one of the things I like is podcasts, and I have a little audio player, and I can go out walking or running or whatever and listen to them. And so here are 3 that are kind of keep you up with what's going on, and someday you only have a topic, but it's not really a learning exercise. It just it gives you a background in an easy way. On YouTube, what Dave had, Learn Linux TV was Jay. That was the first person he put up. And I think Kurt, maybe last month, did the Explaining Computers. That's a good one. It's very good presentation. So Learn Linux TV it goes in depth. Explaining Computers does all kind of hardware and stuff that he tries. Chris Titus Tech is also another Linux, if you want to learn some details. So kind of the top ones are kind of magazine type strategies, and then the bottom ones, they'll eventually cover many topics on Learn Linux TV or Chris Titus. So those are 2 I recommend.
I have a comment, John, about Chris Titus. I've watched a lot of his videos as well, agreeing with Cal there. I've also found that Chris has confused me several times on some of his presentations, and I've looked up some of the facts that he shares and found them to be in error, but 99% of his stuff is really useful information.
I think he's the one, he also covers a lot of Windows stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And again, you've noticed that Cal included the same one that Dave did, and you'll see on my list. So that's a pretty good one for most people.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to switch to my other computer and share it. There we go. And on these, I'd like to add to our list of the YouTube one called DistroTube. And when you go to the different people, I'm going to see if no, I can't use that machine. I have to use this machine's mouse. Control click. See if that starts it up. Okay, I've got, oh, there it's opened many times. When you go to a lot of the websites of these people who do a lot of videos, they have a home page with some information and whatever, but I always like to go to their tab for videos, because then that will show you the most recent video. And DT is his initials, DistroTube is his handle, I guess, does quite a lot of excellent videos about Linux. He's just a very strong Linux user, talks about all different versions of Linux. So you can come here and get a lot of great information from him. You can see that I've just recently, he's talked about some frustrations with Linux and stability, but it's mostly stability with applications. He was just doing a big project where he was rendering a video that he was making, and there was an update to Kdenlive that changed in the background the quality of the video and didn't tell people that, oh, our default's going back to like the 300 or something. So DistroWatch is a real good one to go. And sometimes they even will give you ideas. If we go to channels, sometimes, yeah, he will even recommend some other sites to go to. Okay, get rid of that. It's all the different. Okay, we talked about Learn Linux. It's FOSS. I think that's what Cal mentioned. FOSS has their YouTube channel also, where you can go. Oops, don't do that. And again, it's the same thing. I go to the videos tab to see the most recent ones. And again, they do a wide range. And usually these are very easy to listen to, not too technical. And so it's FOSS.
Raising hand.
Yeah.
Is that Penguin copyrighted?
No Penguin would be copyrighted in Linux.
Could I have that as my background, please?
This one?
Oh yeah.
We can see. You'll have to do some copy.
The one I have.
Yeah, cut, because it'll be the whole banner across there.
Thank you.
Okay, since I got that extra one in there. Let's see, going back. This is one that intrigued me. I'm an average Linux user. I don't think people think I'm not, but or more than that. So here's average Linux user. Now, you've got to realize that some of these are people who are foreign, so you get used to their British or their Indian accent, whatever. But I was appealed to this one this one was appealing to me because we're just talking about installing, configuring, and using it. And that's just the average user. So that's another good one that will include that. This went real well with what we talked about after last month's with Kurt. I've gotten mine so I can SSH into my Raspberry Pi and catch into it. We did it with the Windows version, which used a different program. And
ooh, cool.
Yeah. Looks like tunnel vision, but it's tunnel vision. And if you want to catch a podcast type or video, Michael, I've been watching him, does, as you can see, he has done 201 weekly, what's this week in Linux. So if you want to just get one of these while you're working and listen to him, he tells you every week, what's happening in Linux. And again, on his channels, he will recommend a few others. Das Greek is one of his partners, and Tux Digital is their main place. But Michael, it's easy because you can just turn it on and listen to him and hear what's going on. So like this week, they were talking about OpenSUSE, Leap, which is one of their two, the Tails operating system, and Blender, which is the video program. So each week, what's happening in the news. I also recommend, when I have time to keep reading, some websites that go to. Now, Linux Questions is a forum. It's a general for all. I would recommend get there, sign in so that you'll be able to post questions. Mostly I just read them because it's just like a regular web board where hundreds and hundreds of questions. It's FOSS has their own website, so you can go there each week. I get a weekly email that tells me what's been added. One other website that is good, it's been on our APCUG's webpage with articles from 9 to 5. And here's another one that has news and tutorials and reviews and a weekly roundup. So this one strictly, 9 to 5 or 9 to 5 Linux. So that is another good one that I recommend. And if we go back, make use of, Judy finds this a lot. They do more than just Linux, but they have one that if you go to make use of, you can go to category and go to Linux. So you can go to just their section. Another for a little bit more than beginners or middle people, I sometimes look at these, but then sometimes it's over my head. But Linux Today and Linux Insider are two other very good resources for Linux news. But every I think Orv and Cal mentioned it, every distribution has probably their own forum for all of the people to have questions and stuff. So if you get into one of the distributions, check out their forum or web board, as some people call it, and at least, go there to look up questions. What are people having questions about? What are they having problems with? You can go there and read about it. And I like if it's FOSS because it's just really down to earth stuff. So those are my recommendations to go along with what we've heard. And those of you who have others, stick them in the chat box so that Judy can add those to the follow-up material that we'll be sending out later. Okay, yep. All right, stop sharing on that. Okay, a lot of good information. Yes, I see your hand, Judy.
Thank you. If you belong to a Linux SIG at your group, would you please put the name of your group into the chat box? I'm chatting with Mike Ungerman, and he brought up Brookdale in New Jersey has one. But I have Brookdale, Tacoma, Chicago, Columbus, John's group. If you belong to any other that's affiliated with your main group, Cal's getting ready to type. Thank you very much. I would appreciate it because I have sent out a couple of emails asking that question, and you can imagine how many people I heard from. The big old ordinary 0. So ante up, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Cal. I'm done, John.
Okay. Had to send Orv a quick message. Yeah, and part of the thing is you need to make sure that they are an APCUG group, because I have one that I attended that's a big one, but they're not a part of their major group, or their master group is not a part of APCUG, so I can't really include them in our sharing list. All right, so what we want to do now is, this is a time we've done, I don't know, Judy, have we done this almost 2 years?
May of 2020 was our first one.
First Wednesday workshop, and then we started Linux a little bit later. So yeah, about 1.5 years. So what we're going to do today is hopefully we've got a good representation of people to, before we go into our roundtable for a lot of open discussions and stuff, it's time for us to take kind of surveys and polls to find out where we've been, where we are, where we need to go. These are anonymous, except for the very last one. When you see it, you'll know why that one can't be anonymous, but these are all anonymous, so you don't need to worry about us knowing who you are. We just need some information about your Linux travels and things like that. We did this about a year ago, and it's time to find out some more things. So we're going to see how these polls work with Zoom. I'm starting to get pretty good at this. So I'm going to launch a poll. This one has 2 parts, and we'd like you to answer both parts. Some of these are single choice, which means it's like a yes or no, and some of them are multiple choice. And so you can do that. So here's the first poll that I would like everybody to fill out, which will help us during our discussions when we do the roundtable and things like that. So I'll leave this up for a little bit. I think everybody sees that, right, Judy?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not participating.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Okay, we still have a few people answering. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for this part. And let's go to the next question. This is another 2-parter. We'll come back to sharing the results in our discussions. Still have a few people answering. About 10 seconds. Okay, we'll end that one. Okay, make sure I do it. Okay, these are just kind of easy questions. Again, multiple questions that all go together. You'll see on this one. Just gathering information to better understand. This kind of goes with Cal today, talking about the different families of Linux.
Oh.
And scroll down because there are sub-questions. So I'll let this one go a little bit longer. Interesting. Yes, good. Still a couple more people answering. Okay, we'll end that one. Okay, very similar question. or similar type of question, desktop environments. And Cal mentioned many of these today, and we have talked about many of these in the past. Good. I share with Cal's excitement with technology today that just a little bit ago, the laptop that I used to record just rebooted itself automatically. Unfortunately, it's a Windows machine, so boo. All right. Let's move on. This is an important new one. You know, what those of you who are using, you know, Linux, you know, what do you do with Linux? And if you do something else than what we've checked or offered, let us know what else that we forgot. Oh, I got to launch it. There we go. Sorry. Very good. These will be helpful too. Still have some people doing the short answer one, so we'll let this go a little bit longer. Okay, I think most people are done. Now the big tough one. So this one we need, be honest.
Oh. Oh, cool. Oh, nice questions. You didn't include all of the above.
It's a multiple choice question. Check them all. Good, this is helpful. Judy, we may be able to have a few more Learning Linux workshops.
Cool.
We've got some ideas here.
Name of the game. We do run dry with ideas.
we don't want to be covering subjects that nobody's interested in.
Right.
That too.
Oh, still some typing going on. Oops, I almost hit the end of poll and there came some more stuff in. Okay. Two more. You'll like this one, Judy, the way I did this one. This will also help us to know whether or not we'll have future workshops, because if we don't have anything anybody wants to know about. Then there's only one more after this, and then we can start opening up and talking about it, everything.
We have a comment. However, we sometimes discover new interests by being exposed to new and that technical word stuff.
Mm-hmm. Few more seconds. The Linux team and Judy appreciates taking the time to give us some of these feedback information for us. It's helpful.
And if you can put your Windows hat on, you could also put in the chat box something of interest to you that you'd like to know more about Windows. That helps me. Oh, and the new stuff guy says, and he tries to connect to every single thing that APCUG has to offer because he likes to learn. I added that last part.
Okay.
But I knew that's what he meant.
Okay, we still have a few people answering, so I don't close it yet.
And besides, it's free.
Can't beat that.
Mm-hmm. I just got a suggestion for Windows.
Close them. Okay.
Thank you.
Here's our last one, and Judy will like this.
You guys are mean. And don't forget, you don't have to do it by yourself. You can be part of the panel, a panel of people. You can have a good buddy do it with you, or even somebody you don't like do it with you. Ooh.
Just a couple more seconds on this.
Does that mean only 8 people answered that question? Ooh, there's 12. Ooh, moving along.
It makes it so much easier if you just do a little bit with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, the team does. We did, different parts today, and
like with Cal today, Dave Melton sent me a note that said warts and all, and that's what these are.
Yeah, that laptop over there that was a big wart today for me.
Yep.
Luckily, I can start up another one, and luckily, Bill backs us up. That's part of what he does. Okay, I'm just about ready to close.
Part of having a computer is having problems with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked at home, but it doesn't work at the meeting.
Oh, I almost closed too soon. Somebody else added something. Okay, so what I think we'll do now is we will go to our roundtable, and I'm going to open up the ability for you to share your mics. If you want to make comment, I'm going to share the results of these surveys, and then anybody on the team and anybody else that would like to make comments and share and talk about it, we've got time to just have a good one. So if you want to share, hit that reaction button so your hand goes up and your name goes to the top, so Judy knows who to call on, because with this survey screen, it's going to cover people, so you're not going to be able to see people as well. All right, so let's go with the first question on usage. Share that result with everybody. Does that come up to everybody yet?
Yep, it's here.
You see it? Nope. I think it's just the
64% of the people use Windows, use Linux, and 36 said no.
Yeah, but that evidently that's only. Does anybody else see that besides the hosts? So we know who we're.
I can see it.
Al says he can.
Okay.
I see it.
All right, because my recording one didn't get to see it. All right, so well, good. We have some people that are using Linux, and the important part is the other reason, and I didn't make that into a short answer, and I should have, for why people aren't checking it out. Hopefully, for the not sure where to start, we can get some people to, share with us what we need to be able to tell you. Yep, could be a little bit intimidating, but to me, it's more intimidating than it was when you first started Windows, because it's the operating system. And once we learn how to use an operating system, we don't. Anybody else have any comments we'd like to make about, the Linux usage?
I have a suggestion. This is Joel Sigmund.
Sure.
On that question, if you answered yes, it still expected you to answer number 2.
Oh, did it?
Yes. So I think a lot of us just picked other.
Okay, thanks. That was not an option, that said if you said yes, don't. So I guess that's why you could say that. Did you have to answer it to get out of it?
Yes.
Oh, So there's a flaw in Zoom polls.
Or you could just add a new category that says I answered yes, something like that.
Yeah, could be.
Or you could have had 2 questions. What can I tell you?
Or 3 questions, the second part for that one.
That's true.
Okay. So this sharing the next one, using Linux. We got about 34% of the answerees that make use of it most of the time, and a half, 50% said they use it occasionally. Okay, but this is the one that I was hoping to see some interesting responses about. But 18 people did say, as a result of these workshops, they've been looking into Linux. 19 people said, no, workshops didn't make them take a look at that. But thank you for attending anyway.
Right, and they also learned some things that they didn't know before too.
Yeah.
That's an invisible ink.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody's comments about using Linux? Dale?
This question also didn't let you out. If you wanted to answer number 2 and not answer number 1, it wouldn't let you submit.
Okay,
So
I guess
I had to answer only occasionally because I couldn't answer yes to the bottom.
Oh, okay. Good to know, because it doesn't give you much help when you're in the Zoom polling as to how these things work. They just let you write the questions and put the answers and decide whether they're a single answer, multiple choice, or a short, long answer.
Question number 3.
Stop. I found this very interesting.
Oh.
So when somebody, if somebody asks us, what's the most popular, we can say, at least with our attendees, it's definitely the Mint family, followed by the Ubuntu. And when we look at if the Ubuntu family, the majority are using the flagship Ubuntu, which is also the GNOME GNOME desktop. If for somebody's using Arch, it's probably Manjaro. Yep. And in the Mint family, the flagship one, the one that they kind of say is their big baby, is the Cinnamon, which is another GNOME.
Can you scroll down, please?
I scrolled all the way down.
On that distro use, I see SUSE family is the last thing I see. Was that the last
No.
choice
Other.
on this one?
There was an other.
Yeah, we should make that clear as well. The survey is interactive with all the members of the session here.
You can locally scroll down, Judy.
Oh.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so that's how, so I don't know whether it's because we've talked a lot a bit about Mint, but Mint seems to be the most popular of our group, and Cinnamon as the desktop.
I don't remember, John, is the Cinnamon desktop sort of the default for the Mint family?
They kind of say that is because the Mint family people were the ones that created Cinnamon to begin with, and now other groups are using Cinnamon in their distros, but it originated with Ubuntu. Mint used to have the KDE, but they decided that trying to maintain 4 desktops was too much. So GNOME is their big one, the Cinnamon. Mate is the one that's in the middle, and then the lightweight XFCE at the other end.
A comment, Mint is just a simple conversion for Windows users who don't want to be adventurous adventurous or don't have the time to be. Tom has his hand up.
You didn't include Raspbian for Raspberry Pis.
I figured that that wasn't even going to be much of a mention on there, but thanks for adding that in. That was from Kurt. Maybe that's because of Kurt. I'm now using a Raspbian because I've got it running my Pi-hole. Thank you, Kurt.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so the distro use. Okay, run to desktops. Now, this is kind of a trick question because it also falls into which distro you're using, because in Ubuntu, each different Ubuntu is a different desktop. That's what's different about them. And the same thing for Mint. In the old days, as I think Cal was mentioning, a distribution had a desktop. And so you went with that one. Now, many of them, as for example, Mint has 3 different choices. Ubuntu has, I think, 7 different choices. And Fedora has at least 3. But as we look through here, because of the strong use of Mint, Cinnamon comes out as the top. But we have a few people that are trying some of the newer ones, which is the Budgie and Enlightenment and Deepen. So, okay, KDE kind of comes in too. And we have to separate because there is a KDE and there's a Plasma. Plasma is the newest version of KDE, and that's called Plasma. And GNOME that's on here is now GNOME 3.
Are you on to number 4?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's too many buttons to go on here. Okay, so you can see on here. But GNOME is the GNOME 3, and Cinnamon is a variation of GNOME 3. Mate is a variation of the GNOME 2 from the older days, but it's modern, not old. It's just that there's a whole inner workings that I'm not a developer to exactly explain, but there's slight differences to it.
Ooh.
But one of the things that Mint is trying to do with their 3 versions is have the same software across them all. So they become very similar, but it's just the kind of a desktop environment that you choose. All right, we'll move on.
John, the different desktops environments also give you different ways of customizing your desktop.
That's true. Yeah, very good one. And you know, if Orv was still here, he'd tell you how much you can customize a KDE desktop. And usually the GNOME desktop was known for less ability to customize. People think XFCE is old and drab, but you can do a lot of customizing with that one. All right, let's take a look now at how people are using their operating system for Linux. And we'll see that huge majority use them for browsing, and that's what we expect. Office apps, few for gaming. And I have to pop open the, we'll have to let you know later in the follow-up, because to get to the multiple or the short answers, it's in a file, but we'll include that in our follow-up so you can see what else they might be using. I think it's good to know that there are people who are gaming with Linux, because a lot of people say that, you know, Linux isn't good for gaming, but it's a lot better than the years past because more people want to game. And so the Steam and a few others have really kicked up on that. Definitely good for the video. And as a reminder that most of the stuff in the background of our computer world are Linux computers. So there's a lot of video people out in the California areas that are using the Linux programs to do a lot of video editing and music recording and stuff like that that you just don't know.
Does Kyle use Linux?
Chris, no.
Chris, sorry. Oh,
partly because of where he was at work, and you kind of have to go. That's why, you know, people who use Office a lot of times is because, you know, they use Office in the office.
Ooh.
Okay. Here we go. What's giving you the most trouble? I was surprised about but it's a combination of finding applications, installing. So we'll have to go back over that, because to me, we talked about you go to the software store on your distro, just like you do in Microsoft Store, and you just say, I want this one, install it, and it does. I think the problem with installation is when you go ORS route and a few others through the command line and all of that, but sticking with the store, it's not too bad. Anybody else have comments about with the applications and, you know, installing?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if you go to install an application and for whatever reason it says that the software is not in that repository, but like, for example, sometimes Mint will have even though it's based on Ubuntu, will have some software that Ubuntu doesn't, and vice versa. And I was installing a particular program and I got two different versions, one on Mint and one on Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I add a repository from Ubuntu into Mint or vice versa?
Under software sources, you would want to add the part that says something about universal. With the software, it's like you have bullseye. The center of the bullseye is your distribution's software. The second circle of the bullseye would be software that would be for your kind of like deb packages, which is Ubuntu and Debian. And then the third ring would be all the software that's made for Linux, which some would work with yours and some wouldn't. It's like stores. You go into one store and they don't have the product, but you go to another store, you know, small market in the neighborhood, big grocery store. And usually the reason, and Cal can kind of throw in on that, or anybody else, is that Mint hasn't fully tested that particular software to say, yes, this software is 100% compatible, won't cause any problems. You know, go ahead, Cal.
Let me make a comment. The latest Ubuntu is almost exclusively offering snap packages. And so many of the snap packages can't be found, that many of them are proprietary or whatever. And Mint has flat packs, which is kind of a whole different thing. So right now there's kind of a tussle. So Mint software and Ubuntu software can appear to be quite different. If you're in Ubuntu, you can go to, I think John will tell me the software finder, you know, for Debian type, and you can get anything on Mint. When you're in Ubuntu, they are corralling you in a different direction.
Yeah. There's also a philosophy that right now Mint does not really support Snap. They support the flat pack. So you have to go into Mint and make some changes to allow Snap programs to install on Mint. The other thing, Ubuntu has a lot of what they call PPAs, personal something. And these are people who create software that will work in Ubuntu, but they're out kind of like outsiders. So Mint might say, okay, we only stick with what's in the main store and not go out too far. Yeah, if you stick with your software center, software store, software boutique, you know 100% that software is going to install with no problem. It's when you go outside. But yes, you can add the Ubuntu repositories. You can add the Debian repositories so that anything that's made for Debian can be used by you or installed. Now, Debian stuff might be older. You're looking for newer software, but you're going to get older ones because Debian is slow and methodical to change. Or you might get something that has been tested to work with Ubuntu, but it won't guarantee that something won't happen to your Mint or anything else that's you're using. Stu? Need to unmute yourself if you're going to share.
Stu, there you go.
Okay. Hey, somebody asked a question before about getting a different version of a program from Ubuntu than what they got from the Mint store. I think you got to be careful going to the Ubuntu store and treating that as a common source of Mint, because the things on the Mint store have been guaranteed to work on Mint. I've had different versions of things happen from the Ubuntu store than Mint, and I just don't go there anymore.
Right, they're pushing their snaps, and they put that up. You have to drop down the thing to see if there is a standard Debian build. It's caused a lot of confusion. The Mint people actually go to the old Ubuntu repository. Ubuntu is moving away from its own repository. There's a lot of controversy with the Ubuntu snap. Most of the other distributions, if they're going to add a container, are going to Flatpaks. So what is the package manager that's the general package manager, John?
Synaptic.
Synaptic. So if you go to Synaptic in Ubuntu, you can generally find the standard Linux build. So that's one way, but Ubuntu is hiding a lot of stuff. And that's just the way it is right now.
Yeah. And of course, as Cal mentioned in his other presentation, that there's a third container, and I kind of like it, the app image. So it's kind of the general one. Snap is Ubuntu's big baby. Flatpak was what Mint's going with. And, you know, it's just an idea of a better way to install, but he did all that. Okay, I did get a clarification, and I did put some confusion. Somebody said that I should have had split that comment about finding applications and installing, because their comment was it wasn't the applications or installing applications, it's installing Linux again. So we'll probably kind of come back to that maybe in the future and help people with that part. All right, and
a comment about question 5.
App usage.
Paul recently read that 75% of Steam games are ported for Linux systems.
Yeah, that's why I said that's almost not an issue anymore. The biggest issue is going to be Adobe. Adobe still does not want to create things that'll work on Linux because of the fact that Adobe is a money-making project. Microsoft has said, oh, you know, if we work it a little bit, people will maybe buy it. So they're trying to work it, but you know, the problem is going to be is the biggest thing would be Adobe and their products that are not created for Linux. But there are a lot of products out there that can be used. And my answer to those people is, if you have to use Adobe, then you have to use Windows. You know, simple as that. If you have a huge family, you can't have a smart car. Plain and simple. All right.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Intuit makes QuickBooks and some money managers. They are an impossible thing to move over into Linux also. And I've had more people have that problem than the Adobe problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I forget about that. I don't have any money that I have to worry about Quicken and all their programs, so I don't. All right, as I look at that, because the future things were short answers, the team will look at those, and I'll give the copy, of course, to Judy too, and you know, we can add that into the follow-up material too. Because it'll be interesting to see. And I wanted to make sure that we had two different questions, because this Learning Linux is for everybody. It's not just for experienced users, and it's not just for beginners. We want to be able to reach out to everybody that's interested in Linux and help them on their path where they're going. And so I appreciate all of those efforts. The team will look at that with Judy and get some ideas. We got a little bit of time if there's anybody that wants to discuss and make comment about anything else that the Learning Linux workshop or the Linux in general. There are a lot of people here can probably answer some questions too. So if there's anybody else that would like to share. Next month, the team has got to get together. The topic is going to be, we picked networking in Linux, because we've had some questions and comments about networking. So I can't give you any exact details right now about what all it's going to cover, but Kurt got us started on using the Pi a little bit. So that's the focus for next month. In July, August will probably be vacation month for the Linux team. And then taking all this information we got today will help us plan for fall activities again. So
we're going to have to get together, John, as the team and narrow down the networking subject, because it's huge.
Oh, well, I figured that you were in charge of that.
Oh, thanks.
That's right. Anybody else have? Okay, John, my good buddy, John.
Yes.
Hey, John, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, just a couple of things. I just want to make sure everyone knows about the distrotest.net website to try out Linux distros kind of on the fly without having to install anything or download anything. So that's a good source for, especially for beginners, if they want to try out different distros. That's an easy way to do that. I'm sure we've talked about this before in the past, but just in case we've got some new people on here.
Oh, exactly.
Also, Ventoy seems to be the go-to utility now for installing ISO files, Linux ISO files onto a thumb drive to test out different distros. I just saw an article here recently where it now supports 938 different distros or bootable files.
Great.
So check out Ventoy. It's a relatively new USB creation tool for testing ISO files off of a thumb drive. And then the last thing I wanted to mention too was you were talking about Adobe recently here, or not, yeah, Adobe. I just saw an article too where Adobe has released an online version of Photoshop that is free. So it's a browser-based version of Photoshop that can be used on Linux machines, Mac, Windows, whichever operating system you're using. So I'm not sure if they've launched the website yet, but I did see the article. So, keep an eye out for that if you're a Photoshop fan. And then lastly, I'm just curious as to how many people are using a Linux machine to tap in to this meeting. Are you on a Linux machine to tap into the Zoom meeting? I'm just curious how many people are.
You can give a thumbs up in your reaction if you want.
Yeah, whatever, however you want to do it. I'm just curious if people are people are using a Linux machine to tap in.
Yeah.
And that's
Personally, I've tried, but I've never been able to get my camera to work with Zoom and Linux.
Ah.
Aha. A topic.
Is it a built-in camera for your machine, or is it a standalone?
It's a built-in camera. I've tried two different computers. One is a Dell and another is a Microsoft Surface tablet. And the Surface tablet cameras are very particular about what drivers they use.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had any issues with mine. I've been able to connect.
Yeah, we'll have to check on that, because I haven't either, and I have a very not top of the line, but big company, because Judy got me from somebody out there, found a camera that they said was one of the best ones, and it's like a Weichi or a Weichi, and it's not even a big name brand, and it's worked fine both on the Windows and of course my Linux.
In case people didn't participate, there were probably less than 5 people that are using Linux for this meeting.
Oh.
But then again, there's probably a bunch that didn't answer.
Yes.
Well, that's all I had, so I'll mute myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cal.
I presume it's the Cal from Canada.
The Cal with K.
Soho, yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to let the last responder know that I'm using a USB connected Microsoft HD 5000 with my Linux. I'm not on at the moment with it though, however. So when you go into some of those, I wouldn't say specialty companies, but some of the large assemblers of computer equipment, I think they get proprietary.
Yeah, something we'll have to play around with some other people on that, because that's one thing that I haven't, really run across a lot of problem with the cameras.
Would it be helpful if folks are successful with their webcams that they purchase? They would let us know what they are, so we would have a frame of reference for people who want to buy a webcam that they know the XYZ person uses it and it works.
Yeah.
I like lists.
Yeah. Thomas.
I just wanted to say that I could have been on my Linux machine, which is a Mac Mini, that 2010 Mac Mini that's converted to Ubuntu. And I do have it set up so that it runs Zoom, but I like the 27-inch monitor on my Mac. So anyway, that's why I'm not on that. The camera that I got, the webcam that I got, Kurt and I were talking one day, and I said, well, I didn't have a camera for it. And he says, well, here's one online for $19.95. And so I ordered it, and it works just beautifully. So you don't have to have the best to have a camera that works fine on your Linux machine.
And you're going to send me that information, aren't you?
I'll have to remember what Kurt told me.
Well, that Kurt can, and I'll include that in the follow-up material.
Yeah.
Okay, I will send you that.
You're too good.
I forgot it before Tom did.
Yeah. Well, and then, Judy, if you can remember which one you recommended from your person from out west that one time, it's worked fine. And then I have no problem, because I've got the AB switch, so I can switch back between the Linux machine and the Windows machine, and the camera has no problem going back and forth. So yeah, we'll try to figure that out. John, response. I know.
Yeah, as far as cameras go, my built-in camera on an HP all-in-one worked right out of the chute. I didn't have to, I had no issues. And then right now I'm currently using an external, it's called Jellycomb. So it's C-O-M-B, Jellycomb. I bought it on Amazon, and I've had it work on Linux, Windows, and Mac, all 3 operating systems. So just search for Jellycomb in Amazon. I think it was around $49. And it actually, what's nice about the Jellycomb too, it actually has a built-in LED light on the camera itself. So you can actually, you know, if you need more lighting, if you're in a dark area, you can turn the light on and it'll illuminate your face and area that you're working in. So
was that
one, I've had good success with that one.
Is that like peanut butter and jelly?
Yes. JELLYCOMB. And again, like around about $49 it was at the time, I believe.
On sale for $28.99 right now.
Right. There's always a sale.
Well, I have to say that the price of the camera that I got has gone up $5. And I just sent it off to, I'm sending it off to Julie.
Well, she doesn't live here, but Judy does.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Anyway, I sent it to Judy, and it's a Alarmtech 1080p full HD webcam.
Cool.
And this is the description from Amazon. And
okay.
It's now $25.
Good. For you guys that are dads and people are wondering what to get you for Father's Day, and you go, oh, I have everything. Well, you know, get a webcam that works with your Linux computer. Your kids are always looking for different presents to give their dad that are useful and wanted. Ron.
Yes, I was lucky to get the POP operating system installed on an old laptop that used to have Windows 8 on it. But prior to that, I ran several distros off of a USB drive, thumb drive. I had no issue whatsoever. But when I like Mint, I went to install it and it crashed. I went to install Peppermint and it crashed. But it ran good on a thumb drive. But I was very lucky to get POP in there. But I'd like to try something different. But unfortunately, that's my dilemma. When I go to install something, it's hung up. Is there any websites out there, like we talked about, how to try these different distros, that you could put in the characteristics of your computer that you have and see if the distro matches, that will match that type of computer? Like I said, it's an HP Windows, was an old Windows 8, but it ran an AMD chip. So I don't know if that is an issue with a lot of these distros or not.
Now I'm running an AMD on the last two computers that I built. They're always AMDs. I think that if somebody else wants to comment or add to it, that it's probably going to come out to being a graphic issue. Thanks, Cal. And what you may have to do, and I'm not the expert on this, is that you have to get in and replace the graphic driver so that it's more of a generic one. But that's what mostly I read, that when something won't install, it installs, but you can't see it because the graphic goes messed up. Maybe we'll need to talk about that sometime in the future. But what I would do is go to the Mint forum and search for somebody who has tried. You can, sign up to be in the Mint forum, and then you can post that question. Or easier is, search for that kind of question. It won't run on an HP, whatever, and see if somebody comes up and says, "Oh, you need to." Replace the driver, and here's how to do it. The forums are great because it's everyday people giving you the answers that you are looking for. And, I've done it with the Mint forum, the MX forum, which is, I like. And like that one I said today about the Linux questions, that's very broad, but I would start with the Mint forum.
All right, thank you very much.
I have two people that are not going to be receiving any follow-up material because they don't have their first and last name.
Oh, we'll still give them a chance to get that changed.
That is true.
Anybody else? Appreciate on behalf of the team. I appreciate you taking the time to fill out. Not everybody did, but that's okay. But that gives us some ideas to consider for future, topics and meetings. My goal, which is an impossible goal, is to move everybody onto Linux. And I'm still trying to find the reasons other than Adobe and Quicken why you haven't moved. So
I think over time, the biggest complaint has been about Quicken and the finance programs that will not play with Linux. People are always bringing that up.
Yeah. And that's
John, the Adobe issue, that might be Adobe's resolution, is to make it web-based.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I don't know for sure about the web-based is if you have to always upload your pictures, and people may not be happy about uploading their pictures to the cloud to work on them because they want to keep their pictures on their computers. So we'll have to see how that works out on that.
I suspect we're going to be hearing more about it.
Yeah.
Stu.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Quicken and the QuickBooks thing can be resolved by a web solution also, but it's like an $18 a month fee you have to pay for it. So the fee becomes outrageous over a year,
Good to know.
Are there any more questions, discussion points? Good meeting, John, and Dave, and Orv, who's not here, and Cal with a C.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Bill for being our co-host again, and Judy for doing all of our questions. Hopefully Bill will be asked to share some more of his expertise in home automation and Windows so that we can have some of those workshops. I especially want to thank Cal today for doing an excellent job on DistroWatch. It's a great site, and you were able to share a lot of good information. So people give DistroWatch a try. And what he said, don't think that just because my MX that I like is #1 is the most popular or the best or whatever. It's just the one that everybody's checking out because it's getting to be a pretty good, interesting distro.
Cal with a C could be C cubed because he's Cal from Cajun Clickers.
Yep. Bayou Country. Okay. As far as I know, we're not going to be back next week. We weren't
Yes,
able.
we are.
We are.
Of course we are.
Oh, news to me.
Yes, well, I just confirmed it yesterday afternoon. We are having folks from Tech Boomers website to finish our, unbeknownst to us, arc of the internet, so to speak, this kind of arc, in June. Digital literacy with Tech Boomers.
Oh, good.
And they are a website that APCUG groups can use every single thing that's on there. You can use their videos for SIGs, training SIGs, articles in your newsletter, and on and on and on. When the website first came together in 2015, we had the president give a presentation, and it was warts and all because it was his very first presentation ever. And he put it together for his parents because he got tired of recommending this video or that video for them to learn something. And when they looked at it, it was 1,000 years old. And then in 2018, we had one of the SEO people, Kaylee, give us an absolutely fantastic presentation on it, updated. So we are having Jessica, who manages the YouTube channel, and Corbin, who helped build a lot of what is on the website, and those will be our presenters, and it will be all about Tech Boomers, what they have on their website, and how we can use it for our groups. You don't have a meeting, you know, presenter didn't show up, you can use an APCUG video, or you can go to Tech Boomers and show something of theirs. I've had back in the day people who wanted to know about 3 different apps that I don't use, wouldn't ever use, and they wanted a presentation. I went to Tech Boomers and put a PowerPoint presentation together from what was up there and gave it, and everybody thought they were really great. So hope to see you guys there on the 22nd. Same time, same place. Your house and your bathrobe and fuzzy slippers.
And that registration will be out shortly, since we usually try to get it out before the weekend. And then thank you to all of the clubs that pass it out to their members. I get about 5 or 6 of the same emails because all of my clubs, I'm on their mailing list, so I know they're doing it. And that's how we get the word out. We have plenty of room. There's no standing room yet for our workshops. All right, so thank everybody so much, and have a good rest of your day. Those of you who are in the East like me, stay inside and stay cool.